Welcome to the Hybrid Fitness Podcast, where we talk open and honest about all things health, fitness and business, with your hosts, PJ Black and Michael Lennon.
How's it going, guys? So welcome back to another episode of the Hybrid Fitness Podcast, and on today's episode we have none other than Danny Lennon. Danny has been helping us in the Elite Fitness Performance Academy with the Advanced Nutrition course, and has his own platform in terms of Sigma Nutrition and Sigma Podcast Radio, or Sigma Nutrition Podcast. And I'll just let him introduce himself. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I'll keep it short so as not to bore people, but basic background that might be relevant is I have a master's degree in nutritional sciences, have been working as the head of my own company, Sigma Nutrition, for the past number of years, which is a company that aims to put out evidence-based information around nutrition through both coaching and just content production as well. And yeah, that's pretty much me.
Well, I know from personal experience there's a lot more to you in terms of like what you like to do with powerlifting and other stuff. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you get into nutrition, how you get into training.
Yeah, sure. So I suppose the way most people end up getting involved in either training or nutrition fields was mainly just out of interest for themselves. And that was the case for me too. Played a lot of sports growing up, and sport was almost my main thing. So played a lot of soccer, played a lot of Gaelic football to, I would say, pretty decent levels growing up. And then when I went to college, started doing some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and some MMA, and all through that time of various different sports. Once I got to kind of college, I started lifting weights really as a way just to supplement that, just to help my performance on the pitch and in the gym. So started lifting some weights, got interested in that. When I was in college, started studying science. So I was doing biology and physics. So started learning how to read research properly, where to look for stuff. And so really as a kind of hobby in my own time, started looking for research papers that related to things that might help me with my own athletic performance, just because I was kind of obsessed with just training at that time and different sports. And so I obviously looked at things like sports psychology, and I looked at exercise science, and then looked a bit at nutrition. And that was the thing that kind of grabbed me of how not only interesting it was, but how it affected pretty much everything even outside of sports, and how a lot of it was probably different to what I had believed up to that point. So just kept reading more and more about that stuff. And kind of fast forward a few years from there, I'd graduated from college as a teacher. I'd been a science teacher for a year and decided I was going to quit teaching, wanted to go and do my own thing. So I went back to college and started studying nutritional science. And yeah, the kind of rest is history from there. Got out and started Sigma Nutrition. We coach a lot of people online now, produce a lot of online content, like you mentioned, the podcast, articles, that type of thing, speak at conferences and do workshops. And so, yeah, that's kind of a bit about what I suppose motivated me originally to get down this nutrition route.
Awesome.
And I suppose then the other thing you mentioned is just kind of where I'm at now with kind of sports. It's taken away from a turn in the past couple of years more just towards powerlifting. So compete in powerlifting right now with an Irish Powerlifting Federation. Been doing so the last couple of years, and that's kind of only real focus for me as an athlete these days.
Awesome. I loved, the point you hit home there about the reason why you get into this was you wanted to find out more information for yourself. And I think that's relevant for a lot of people and even coaches out there. It's, I remember when I was 15, 16 and going to like my local leisure centre with my granddad, and then I would just be Googling things all day. I'm not that old, by the way. I still Googled back in the day. Just in case anybody wants to question what do you tell. But just like getting so much information, and I would print stuff off and I would read it religiously, and I would try and apply it to my life. And I don't know how much of it actually helped, or maybe it was just like the newbie gains, the just training and just eating whatever you wanted was going to result in some form of benefit. But no, I thought that was a good point, because at the end of the day, I think we're all searching for the right thing for us, whether it's training or nutrition wise. And very much so when I speak to people about nutrition, I very much tell them I've tried a lot of things. a lot of different principles, a lot of, nutrition protocols, supplements, whatever it is. And for me, if I can pass on that experience of, as you say, the evidence-based stuff that you're going to talk about, and obviously the applicable stuff, and then actually did it even work? Or what we talk about with the students at Elite now is forget about the actual protocol, whether it's intermittent fasting or if it fits your macros or any of this stuff. What is the actual mechanism behind why they work? And really refining it down. And we do that with programming and stuff as well. So forget the name and just develop the program for the client. So I thought that was a great point. You mentioned there that, Sigma is very much based on evidence-based research. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think it's a term that I think has grown a bit more in popularity within the kind of fitness industry. But for kind of, suppose, an accurate understanding of it, evidence-based practice is, I think, the best foundation most professionals should probably aim for. And evidence-based practice is simply based on 3 different components, which are all important to have. And I think people maybe miss out on all of one or more of those 3 components. So the first one is the obvious one, is basing most of the recommendations we make to clients on solid evidence that's within peer-reviewed research. So not just selecting 1 or 2 research papers, but on the average, what is the scientific consensus where most of the evidence on this particular topic lies? So if we're talking about should an athlete we coach supplement with creatine, for example, we will look and say, okay, with all the evidence that's out there on creatine, most of it would lean in the direction of saying that it will impart a benefit for performance. So therefore, we're going to recommend it at this dose because this is being used most often in research. So using research to inform our practice. The 2 other components of evidence-based practice are what maybe get left out or people don't realize that are important components, is using your experience and expertise as a coach. So not thinking you need research paper for every little thing you do, or that you need to throw out all your methods because someone told you something else that a paper showed you. And using your experience as a coach and your expertise and what you've seen work for clients, what you know about how they're going to react, what works in the real world, and using that as part of your practice too. And then the third component is the individual needs and requirements of the person as well. So this could be, for whatever reason, any one individual that you coach might respond better or worse to a typical intervention that works, on the average, works in such a way with most people, but for whatever genetic variation or whatever about this particular individual, they don't respond in the same way to most people, so you might need to modify their approach. And that just happens with trial and error over time. And so you just might have something that you're doing with typical training program with someone, and most of the time it's always been working, but for this person, for whatever reason, it just doesn't suit them, or they don't seem to get the same result. You switch to something a bit different and then that works for them. So bearing that in mind and not being too rigid on, I need science to explain everything, or I need to have proof of everything I'm going to do. And really it's distributing it through all those 3 things I mentioned. But with the idea being to get us in the best starting point. The kind of best start should be to base most of the recommendations we're going to do on actual evidence that we can back it up with.
Awesome, Tom. I think that was a great point that you said in there about the coach, having that experience and maybe being able to guide the person. Obviously using the evidence-based stuff as a guideline, and obviously changing and adapting as per the client in front of you. Do you think that, science is fully caught up yet? Well, it's probably a tough question. Do you think science is not that far away from practical application at this moment in time? So in terms of, maybe some of the things we see as coaches, has science maybe started to validate some of this stuff, or, tell us that stuff is, not working or it hasn't been backed? But
there's 2 ways to look at this. There's one, if you look kind of traditionally at, say, the field of sports science, anything that had been evaluated within sports science research, and therefore, so with science, we want to take something, we want to test it with research, But to see if that actually the result of that paper was accurate or not, we need it replicated by other groups of researchers doing similar studies, and over time we build a picture. So in order to get to a point where you test a certain, say, training intervention, and then that's been replicated by many other kind of research groups, you're never, like in sports science, you would never start testing something that people aren't doing in the real world, because it makes no sense, right? Where would you get the idea for it in the first place? So a lot of the stuff that would come out from sports science is something that people have been doing. We've seen it kind of anecdotally reported that it works. So now we're going to use science to try and work out why it works, or is there to what degree does something work, or the underlying reason why. And so sure, there could be coaches using certain things that may not have direct evidence behind them yet. And I think that's always why we need to bear in mind, use your own expertise and experience as part of your decision making, not just relying on science, because maybe we just don't have research on a specific topic yet. It just might not be there. The difference is, if someone is doing something with their clients where we have research already showing that it's either a bad idea or the opposite, that something else is better than that intervention, then we should modify what they're doing there. We should do something that's got actual research behind it. So to some degree, you do see that trend where people could be using things that we still need research on. And certainly just because there's no research on it doesn't mean it doesn't work. There's a phrase that's often used, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. So there's two different things that research could show you. We might have a protocol where we have clear research showing that it doesn't work or it's bad. So then in that case, yeah, don't use it. But we could have another protocol where we just don't have any research on it yet. Now, that doesn't mean it's good or bad yet. It just means we don't know. So if there's something else that we do have research behind, we can use that. But for this thing we don't know about, if you're finding it effective, then sure, stay doing it. The second point I'd add is the big difference that often comes up here that kind of gets lost is it's different depending on if we're giving recommendations for, say, the public at large, for like a public health message, or to a mass group of people trying to give a recommendation, versus what we as a coach decide to do with one specific person. So if I'm talking to a large number of people and they want to say, okay, on average, what should I kind of do with my diet? Then you would talk about, okay, based on what we know from research, on the average, most people will get a positive response from X, Y, and Z. Now, if you're working with one person one-on-one and you're working for them for a few months and you start figuring some stuff out, you might realize that, hey, this person maybe is an outlier, or that this thing doesn't work for them, or we just tried this other type of dieting strategy and for whatever reason they just did really well with it. So then you would modify their approach to reflect that, even though it's not necessarily the kind of evidence-based recommendations you would give to a large number of people, because really you're just talking about on average what works. So there's two different components there to realize of what, or the kind of limitation of science, I suppose, to what it can explain. It can give you a good starting point of what should work on average, but the two limitations that you bring up is, one, it might not explain it for an individual, and two, if we don't have research on something right now, it doesn't tell us it doesn't work. It just means we don't know. So yeah, there's loads of examples of that type of stuff that we could get into.
Yeah, and like science-based and evidence-based research has been becoming so much more popular these days. And I think my issue comes with it is, and I'm sure you see this in every other thing, it's the keyboard warriors who are hardcore scientists compared to, you know, maybe say your general meathead who is very much, you know, I've been doing this for years and this is my way and this is my approach. And no offense to anybody's listening there, but it's almost like the, oh, I'm vegan, you know, no, well, everything else is wrong sort of debate. It's just like, okay, hold on. Right. And that's what I like about the science-based stuff. I think there does have to be that blend of, you know, coaching experience and application. And, you know, I think the boundaries are pushed a lot from, I would say mainly in probably weight cutting sports, the stuff that you've wrote a lot of research and stuff about, and like bodybuilding and stuff as well, where people are maybe going beyond, you know, the scientific threshold that has been given and are finding ways, but, you know, maybe sometimes at the expense of people's health. But yeah, so that was great. Thank you, Danny. So just like, obviously for anybody's listening, we want to do this aim more towards the weight loss and stuff as well. So how can a general sort of person, how can somebody who's maybe just going to the gym wants to better their nutrition, how can they interpret this information? Or is it, listening to stuff like yourself to try and break it down in a simpler format? What's your take on that? What can people do to improve their nutritional IQ?
Yeah, so I think what you talked about right at the start of the podcast actually speaks a lot to this, is when you talked about you go and start Googling things and trying to find information and read up about it. And maybe some of that stuff wasn't effective, or maybe it was, it's hard to know. And I would kind of argue that to a large extent in those early stages, it probably didn't matter, right, whether each thing you did was better or not. The key thing that probably helped you in the long run was that you actually were just trying to learn more, and you were going about making changes. And because you were reading up on stuff and you said, okay, now I'm going to do this with my diet or this with my training, now immediately, regardless of how good or not that thing was, you're now more conscious of what you're doing. You're on a day-to-day basis thinking about what you're eating. You're being a bit more conscious with that. You're making sure that you're training 4 times a week or whatever it was. So rather than just having no awareness of any kind of healthy behaviors, you're now suddenly aware of what you consume on a daily basis, how active you are, and so on. So I think the first place starts with people getting to a point where they actually actively want to make change, and they see the value in making that change, and then they're just aware of what they're doing. So just whether that is from a nutritional perspective, whether that's writing down a food diary, whether it's taking pictures of their meals and sending them to a coach, whether it's tracking their intake on MyFitnessPal, like whatever it is, something that makes them just aware of what they're kind of currently consuming, what their typical dietary habits are, when are they most likely to snack, when are they most likely to consume meals that probably aren't going to be helpful for their goals, when is it easiest for them to stick to their diet, all that type of stuff. Just being aware of what they're doing is a starting point. Then in deciding what to do from that point, I think there's so much misinformation out there, and you could probably read somewhere online, like any nutritional perspective you can read somewhere, you'll find someone that says the complete opposite, and everyone will argue that. Like, I can pick any type of food or any type of macronutrient, and you'll find somewhere online where someone will tell you it's bad for you, and then you're left with like nothing to eat. So really, when you look at the mass amount of research, it really is like the simple stuff that people would presume for a long period of time that's actually going to be useful. In order to be healthy, most of your diet should be from what we'll term like minimally processed food. So not all your diet, you can still fit in your favorite treats and all that type of stuff, but just the majority that you have should be from what we think of as good quality food. So your fruits, vegetables, lean meats, eggs, nuts, seeds, whole grains, all that type of stuff that most people are aware of are like classed as healthy foods. Most of that, try and cook it yourself or something that's similar to that, and then be able to fit in smaller amounts of just maybe processed foods or junk food or whatever people want to call them. Second to that, whatever your goal is, if that's to say either lose body fat, or whether it's just to stay the same weight, or even if it's to say gain muscle, depending on what your goal is, eating an appropriate amount of food. So if you are staying the same weight all the time, but your goal is to decrease your body weight over the next 2 months, then you need to do some sort of change that's going to change how much food you're consuming. So decrease those calories. So that doesn't necessarily mean counting calories. It could be, but you could, for example, just make some substitutions. You look at the typical meals you're consuming. You think about, okay, which one of these is probably really high in calories, or which one is the portion size too big, and maybe you just make a substitution of this type of meal for a different one, or you just reduce the portion size, or you change how many snacks per day you eat. Like whatever it is, you're doing something that will change your calorie intake. Do that. So if you take care of how much you consume, the general type of food you consume, and then maybe as like the cherry on the cake of making sure you get a good amount of protein across the day, that'll be helpful for someone dieting, and particularly for someone that's maybe training and coming into the gym. If you just did those things, and then we're just aware of trying to get as much sleep as you can and generally being physically active, for the vast majority of people, like that's all you really need to know. Like any of the more advanced stuff is interesting for me to talk about, and I like looking at science and research and stuff, but for virtually 99% of the population, you don't need to go reading scientific stuff. You need to be aware of general principles around nutrition. You need to maybe look to sources of information that aren't sensationalist or like trying to sell you some sort of scam or promising you like the one diet method that works. Like it's the people that are probably giving more sensible advice that doesn't sound all that exciting that are probably the most trustworthy. Whereas if there's someone talking like in very absolutist terms of this is the diet that is the best, or this is the one way that you are going to get as lean as you've ever wanted in 4 weeks time, even though someone has like never changed their diet before, has never trained, like it's just trying to sell you on something. So really the things that are going to make the biggest difference are simple, but they're not easy to do. And so as we'll probably talk about later on, the real challenge for most coaches, and then for just general people who want to make change, is doing that, is making the change, is building new habits, is putting in place behaviors that they can actually stick to, and is being consistent with those new things. That the actual changes are not like some super secret, like they're really simple to understand, and ones that most people would guess out. How much food are you eating, and what types of foods in general, and are you sleeping and being physically active? That's pretty much it. And if someone who isn't doing those things starts doing more of that stuff, they're going to make progress.
Awesome. I think for me, hitting the nail on the head, it's the way that I would coach as well. It's, if we have someone track their food, whether it's a Written Food Diary or MyFitnessPal, and the one thing that I look for there is when someone comes back and goes, oh my God, I didn't realize I was eating so much, or I wasn't eating so little, or I didn't know there was X amount in this type of food. And for me, I've done my job. As you say, I've made them now aware of what they're actually consuming, and then we can come up with, a strategy. So for me, nutrition coaching is not telling someone essentially what to eat, because as you say, everyone knows they should be eating more fruit, veg, lean proteins. People sort of know that, and I say my job is to find a strategy that suits you and a way that suits you, not me having a bias, in what I do currently. Before I go on holidays, usually I fast until a certain time. I'm up from 6 a.m, I have an 18-hour day. I just shorten my eating window. I still hit my calories, my macros. So it just suits me. I don't turn around to everybody and tell it's the best thing in the world. Just like that's a strategy that suits me. We just need to find what suits our shift worker, our general mum, our 9-to-5 office worker. And it's just like, okay, portion sizes, meal frequency, depending on what suits you. And then obviously, as you say, they're just trying to come up with something and make them more aware. But no, I think that's good information. Even when I teach my coaches, or even I have a nutrition webinar called Dietary Intervention for Fat Loss, a lot of it then comes down to habits and behaviors. And I talk a lot about hierarchy of needs and behavioral change model and stuff like that, because I can tell someone why they're falling down. Because as you say, the common information is we know we should be eating these fresh fruits, vegetables, and all this other stuff. It's just like, okay, here's potentially where you're falling down, and here's maybe some of the simple changes to do that. But I think unfortunately people just want everything really quick.
Yeah, I think, so there's usually, I see either one or two ways where people are kind of failing to make progress, even though they want to. And one is, like you say, they're just not aware of what they're doing. And you see this all the time, and this is even backed up by research on the topic of if you were to ask people, for example, do you know roughly how much calories you might consume in a day? People can guess, but they'll be wildly off, like just no clue. It could be simple things like asking someone, how often do they snack? And they might say, I'll have 1 or 2 snacks a day. You get them to write down a food diary or log it in MyFitnessPal, and after a week, on average, you're actually eating 4 to 5 snacks a day. But it's just we selectively forget that stuff. Or how many times I'm sure someone has came into the gym and you say, okay, give me an idea of what you eat on a typical day, and they just give you like this perfect day, right? It's like, I'll have porridge in the morning, I'll have probably a salad at lunch, and maybe some just potatoes and just something small in the evening. But what they're actually doing is completely different, and it's selectively, either consciously or a lot of the time it's just subconsciously, people are not reporting what they typically do. So that skill of just being aware through writing down what you're eating or tracking it somewhere gives you that awareness. And then all the change you need to do is quite intuitive. It's like, let's look at what you're doing. Where's the lowest hanging fruit of like something we could change that would be a benefit, and then just make that change. So if it's not a lack of awareness, it could be people already know what they're not doing right. So like you said, people know they should be eating more vegetables, not eating all this like takeaways 4 nights a week. Like, it's more about, okay, you know what I shouldn't be doing, but how do I make that happen consistently? Because I find I can do it for a week and then I just stop. And then it's about building those behaviors like you talk about. And that's really why I think a lot of the more psychological and kind of social issues are probably more important to discuss a lot of the time and to think about than worrying about like specific numbers of macronutrients or whether carbs are going to kill me or whatever it is.
Yeah. Just on that point, we know obviously the main sort of main thing that determines whether we lose weight or gain weight is obviously calories, and obviously with macronutrients. But what do you think, like when you get a client that comes in, as you say there, they give you that typical healthy diet, and then they turn around and go, I don't know why I'm not losing weight. You know, as you say there, I think there probably is misinformation from the client that's coming. I think there was a BBC show a few years ago, and this girl was on. She was an actress, but she wasn't that well known, and she talked about like how she only eats fresh fruit and fish, and how she wasn't able to lose weight, and she must have a slow metabolism. So they made her fast for 12 hours. She had something. They put her into a metabolic chamber. They measured the rate at which she broke down that food. And then after it was like, no, your metabolism is the exact same as everyone else's. So she had to do a video food diary and a written food diary. Did you see it? I
didn't know, no. I haven't seen
it. On the video food diary, she underreported by 20%. Right? Now, she didn't mean to. It was just, as you said, it was unconscious. And on the written food diary, she underreported by about 30 to 40%. So she would write down a fruit salad for breakfast, but the fruit salad bowl was massive. Portion size in the context. She would be having a salad for lunch, but not adding in the olive oils and stuff that she would be having with it. And as you say, the 1 or 2 snacks. And to her, she was just assuming that, oh, this is healthy. So that must be what's leading me towards obviously losing weight. So the point I was trying to make there is like those guys who generally do eat healthy, but are not achieving body composition. Like what's your tips for those guys? I know it's probably still the same thing talking about, but how do you coach those?
So I think the big thing from the get-go is just once people are aware that if you are eating healthy, and sure, like, so say someone is eating most of their diet from healthy foods, they only eat when they're hungry, they don't overeat, they when they're hungry they start eating, and when they're full they're kind of done, and everything is good and they're training, and they're like, I don't understand, I'm not losing weight. It's like, well, that's not the goal, right? That's not your body's goal. To be healthy, it doesn't want to continue to lose body fat, because that would be a bad idea. So by you staying the same weight and eating healthy foods, you probably are healthy. It's just that healthy eating isn't the same as eating for fat loss. What eating for fat loss is any diet that's going to work for you to lose body fat. What it essentially is at the end of the day is under eating by enough that your body has to start using up some of these fat stores. So it's purposely, to some degree, like not semi-starving, but purposely under eating the requirements that your body has. So to the point where at some stages you're going to be a bit hungry, or you're at least going to want to have had more. And that's going to happen because you are purposely under eating. That's what dieting is. So kind of divorcing those two ideas is useful for a lot of people to realize, oh, I'm eating healthily, but that's not the same thing as purposely eating to try and lose body fat. That's it. They're kind of like disconnected ideas. Once they know that, and we know it's okay, it's generally about this kind of energy balance, so calories in and calories out. Let's look at what you're doing, and we're going to have to do some sort of thing to reduce that calorie intake, and then that will allow you to stay or to start dropping some body weight, and we'll be able to see that. So, and we mentioned previously, it could be tracking those calories and some macronutrients and just changing how much they aim for, or it could be saying, well, once you fill out this food diary, we notice that you end up like snacking quite a lot in the evenings when you're watching TV. So maybe what we're going to try and do for you is have your last main meal at, say, 6 p.m. or 6:30 when you come in. And then just we're going to fast you from then until the next morning, because you said you're not really that hungry in the evenings, but you end up just picking at food. So let's see if that works for you. You can just eat more earlier in the day. And for some people, that might work great. You might have someone that's the opposite, who actually would do better by, maybe they end up changing and having a smaller breakfast. Maybe you have someone who is, again, having this healthy salad that you talk about, but maybe they're drowning it in lots and lots of olive oil and having like a huge handful of Brazil nuts on there. And it's just adding up more and more calories. So you say, okay, we're going to have pretty much the same meal, but let's just modify how much of that oil you're adding. Let's change some of this stuff for X, Y, and Z. When you're having that bowl of yogurt, instead of adding a big handful of nuts onto it, let's put some blueberries on it to flavor it instead. Like, just little things that we know without you counting calories are going to reduce that calorie intake. And it just needs to be done to the point where body weight starts decreasing. So once people realize that, okay, the goal is to do some sort of thing that allows me to undereat on calories, but that I can stay sane enough to stay doing it, I think that's probably where they'll start making change. And just getting to that realization that, okay, if my body weight isn't changing at all, and I'm not losing any body fat, and I claim I've been dieting for the last 3 months, I haven't been dieting. I've been trying to diet, and I've been undereating some of the time, but then I would stop and overeat by enough to cancel that out, which is often what happens. People starve themselves for a few days and then will binge on a Saturday, and then their net average for the week is basically 0. So your body weight isn't going to change. So dieting for 3 months is very different from, for the last 3 months, I've been going through cycles of starving myself and then binging.
Yep. Awesome. So just something else I wanted to ask you about there, just as you were talking, is it's the differences really in nutrition for males and females. Do you have any differences? Are there special considerations? It's just, I know when I work with female clients, and we obviously have the menstrual cycle, and we talk about follicular and luteal phases and all the different hormonal responses, which I think Lyle McDonald has spent the last 2 or 3 years researching, putting his head away. But is there any special considerations you would have for males versus females?
So like you said, there's a lot of kind of extensive stuff out there, and certainly that Lyle has looked at, and how maybe modifying some of these things at different phases, or how training might be affected and so on. But the general principles that we're talking about for someone to be making progress or not aren't going to be affected by gender. As in, if someone is not losing body fat, even though they've been trying for a considerable amount of time, it's because they haven't been in a sustained calorie deficit. Like, that's just it, regardless of whether they're male or female. So some of the hormonal things may play a role from a practical perspective of, does that alter the craving for certain foods at certain times? Or does that mean they respond differently to, say, a certain training intervention? Like, that stuff could be at play, but if they're not making progress, it's just that there's going to be no calorie deficit present. So to start losing body weight, we need to do something to do that. Now, from a practical perspective, one thing that we do quite differently with our clients based on being male or female comes to the assessment and monitoring of how things are going, particularly in relation to body weight. So the way we will typically get people to measure body weight is, rather than like a weekly check-in or fortnightly, we'll try and get them to take their body weight more often. So ideally every day, if not maybe 3 to 4 times a week, and then get a weekly average of their body weight. And then as the weeks go by, we can start comparing the average of this week to an average of another week to see if that's generally trending down. Now, the one thing that would be different is, in premenopausal women, we try and look at this of comparing, say, a certain week to the same week in the following month. Because what will happen over the course of the menstrual cycle is massive changes in body weight just due to water retention and body water that have nothing to do with them actually changing body fat levels. So rather than comparing week 1 to week 3 or 4 of their cycle, we'll just compare week 1 of this month to week 1 of the next month, and just if there's enough of a difference in the averages for those 2 weeks, we know they're making progress. So that'd be one major difference where something like the menstrual cycle would play a role in how you monitor progress, for example. But outside of that, most of the stuff that people worry about isn't as big a deal. So like one of the big myths that used to be going around is that women should never do intermittent fasting because it messes up their cortisol levels. And really, there's nothing that I've seen that actually lends any real credence to this. There's and anecdotally from working with people, it's whether it's male or female, it's just whether that's a useful strategy comes down to the individual and not down to gender in any way. There's like, you can point to so many females that have done an intermittent fasting protocol and found it successful, find it useful, doesn't mess up their hormones, and there's no reason at least for me to think that it's going to do anything like that. So they're the types of things that people worry about, should we need to avoid. But really, I don't think it's worth worrying about those types of things. And again, it's still going to come down to those basic principles, and the differences are more going to be on a practical level, as opposed to physiologically something is going to mean a whole new set of rules for losing body fat.
Awesome. Danny, just again, a question I get asked a lot as well is the first thing usually whenever you're telling someone that they come in, they trying to drop their body fat or weight loss, it's just like, okay, I think it's probably a lot of an Irish thing, can I drink alcohol? And we would talk about, obviously, in terms of the individual and the client being good, but obviously the fact alcohol is lipolysis, fat burning, but also the fact of, I think you mentioned, you had it on before, but is this actually going to bring you closer to your goal or not? I know there is some people who can drop body fat and still be having alcohol, but like, have you seen any sort of changes in body composition for people who are, taking alcohol? For me, I usually see an average maybe 2 to 5 pounds increase in people's weight. I think that's mainly down to, as you say, there, the water fluctuations, and then that's why I don't really weigh people until the weekend, because usually the first thing they want to do come Monday morning is just like, it's the same with guys with refeeds, or like right. People who are, putting in additional amount of calories. The weight will go slightly up, and then it should tailor down. As you say, the average is probably the best. But what would your advice be to people who are obviously looking to have alcohol in their diet and still, lose body fat?
Sure. So this comes down to 2 things. One, is it possible for someone to make progress and still consume alcohol? The answer is yes. How much that's going to play a role depends on a few things. Depends on, obviously, the individual, depends on how much alcohol are we talking, and it depends on what consuming that alcohol is going to do to the rest of their nutritional choices. If we were talking about this being simply like a robot, where we say, okay, we're going to give 3 units of alcohol here, we're going to account for what calories are in there, and we're going to take them out of your food allocation from somewhere else in the week, should on average your progress be the same? Pretty much should be, right? Within reason, that's a small amount. Now, in practical terms, someone that says, okay, so it's possible for me to lose body fat over the next few weeks and stay going out. So they go every Saturday night and they have 12 pints, right? Like, realistically, how much calories they're going to be accumulating there, and trying to take that from the rest of their week, plus what it's likely going to do to their food choices both that night and the following day, is going to make it very, very difficult from a practical perspective to get anywhere close to the ability of what they were going to consume otherwise. And plus, they're essentially wasting up so much of their calories that could have been gone towards, say, protein to recover from training, or to build some new muscle mass, or just any healthy foods that would have been consuming. It's just taking away already a limited number of calories, given that they're going to be trying to eat in a deficit, and it's also going to mess up probably training quality for a couple of days. So on a practical level, it causes issue. So it's obviously not optimal, but if someone wants to include alcohol and wants to be able to drink whilst they're dieting, it's possible. A lot of it can be done based on like particular choices, like we say, having an idea of how many drinks they're going to have and be able to account for that number of calories somewhere else in the week. Maybe on that given day, they reduce their carbohydrate intake by the same number of calories so they can fit it in. Maybe they make lower calorie choices, So it could be something like a clear spirit and like a diet mixer would have a lot less calories. But again, depending on, are you going to drink the same number of drinks? If you're just going to switch to vodka and Diet 7-Up, but have 3 times as many drinks as the couple of bottles of beer you're going to have, probably just stick with the beer, right? So how much they're consuming, what choices they're going to make is going to make a big difference. Whether they're getting into a place where, because they're drinking and maybe they get a bit drunk, not only do they eat something that night, but then the next day they're hungover, they don't feel like sticking to their diet, and they eat whatever, that's going to have to be factored in. So yeah, theoretically it's possible. It makes it just more difficult. And then it just depends on how specific someone's goals are. So do they have a set time of they want to make as much progress as they can in 6 weeks? Or is it, I'm just generally trying to eat healthy and keep my body composition in check? Well, if that's the case, yeah, sure, it's easy to factor in alcohol. If it's you want to make as much progress as you can in the next 6 weeks, then I'd probably argue, well, can you just modify that behavior for those few weeks? And then we can kind of transition to something different. So yeah, theoretically, yes, you can do it, but just be aware of the potential downsides, which are namely the calorie intake, its effect on your food choices that night and the following day, its effect on your training progress, and then the fact that because you have to allow for those calories you're consuming via alcohol, that'll decrease the calories you can consume from actually whole foods and meals, which not only are good from a health point of view, but also will help with, say, satiety and how full you feel, stuff we mentioned earlier, because you're actually getting those calories from whole foods. So they're the limitations, but if someone want to go out, it's possible through some of the stuff that I mentioned.
Good. So I'm just going to tell him Danny Lennon says no. No.
Just send him that clip over and over.
No, computer says
Yeah.
no from the robot.
Yeah.
So a couple of the last questions here. So what do you see, the main differences between, maybe athletes and general population? I know there's a huge amount, but like in terms of nutrition, should general pop be eating like athletes? Should athletes be eating like general pop? What's your views?
So general population is kind of, like we said, those few core things that you stick to is probably enough. Generally how much you're consuming and the quality of that food on the average is probably enough for most people just to remain kind of healthy, making sure you're getting a variety of different food sources and enough nutrients. With an athlete, it becomes very specific, again, depending on what sport they have, not only what foods they're consuming, but the specific amount of macronutrients for those. So if you're talking about like anyone that plays a field sport or is a combat sport athlete, you can't just say, oh yeah, just eat enough and make sure you get a bit of protein. Like they need to be on like quite a high intake of carbohydrate. The timing of those meals matters a whole lot more than it does for the general person. Like they need to make sure they get certain nutrients in a certain window after training, particularly if they're training, say, twice a day. They can get away with, or actually it's beneficial for things that would be counterproductive to someone in the general population. So for example, for high-end athletes doing a lot of training, consuming something like a Lucozade Sport or another drink that's basically just water and sugar is actually beneficial sometimes to helping performance and to helping recovery. For the general population, doing something like that would be a terrible idea. If you train like 3 times a week for an hour, like not only is there no need to do it, it's actually counterproductive to consume, say, a sports drink. So the timing of the nutrients, the obviously the amount overall of just how many calories they're consuming, how many carbohydrates they're going to consume, some of the food choices in terms of like things like sports drinks and the amount of, say, sugar or junk food that can probably fit in and still be beneficial is going to be different. And then obviously when it comes to things like supplementation, that's going to be geared towards athletes. So for a lot of it, the same principles will apply to athletes, but they just need to pay attention to the smaller details a lot more. Like I said, like things like timing and specific food choices after training and all that type of stuff is going to just be a lot more dialed in and contributes more to their goal than it does for the average person.
Awesome. You mentioned a point there, and I think you probably see this a lot as well in terms of the bro science involved in more endurance-based sports, as you said, they're mentioning about, your Lucozade Sports, your racing gels, and slowly but surely every year you see the people who run marathons just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's based on, we had a running coach come through the academy, and he was a case of, he was saying the exact same thing. He was like, you have these people who are turning up on race day with like 20 gels. I've never probably used them, so they're going to probably end up doing a Paula Radcliffe halfway through it. Or the fact that they've just been told you have to be eating, rice and pasta and carbohydrates, and everything is geared towards that. We do obviously having that is protein sparing, but do you see a lot of that misinformation, that bro science more in the endurance sports? To be fair, I think I actually see it a lot more, because I've dealt with a few MMA guys and a few fighters, and coming from certain clubs, it's just like, oh, do this, don't do this, starve yourself here, sweat this out. What do you think the misinformation is there for those types of athletes?
Yeah, so I agree. It's just not taking into account essentially just the requirements of that individual person in terms of how much energy do they actually need. So saying it's because what's happening is like, oh, you're a runner, so this is what a runner should eat, and it shows you what like the top levels runners are doing. But it's like, look at the workload they're able to clock up and how much miles they're using, and therefore how many calories are required just to sustain that is different from someone who goes for like a 5K twice a week, right? So fueling them the same way is, when people hear that, it's like, yeah, of course, that sounds stupid. The same way as if I was putting in place dietary recommendations for someone on the Irish rugby team, you're not going to have to feed them to the same degree as someone who goes and plays tag rugby twice a week, right? It's sure, like, you're trying to eat and you kind of like this sport, but the requirements you actually have are so vastly different because of what you're putting your body through. So some people just aren't capable of actually being able to I suppose use enough energy through the types of workouts they're capable of to warrant the type of intakes they're having, and that's what it comes down to. So if like now we're seeing within sports nutrition, a lot of the research paper that's published, whether it's in relation to carbohydrate or how you'd periodize carbohydrates, even there's a term floating around, fuel for the work required. That's essentially what you're looking at. Physiologically, what do you require to do this workload you're going to do? And let's fuel appropriately for that. So instead of just saying, oh, I'm going cycling, it's like, yeah, but what specifically are you doing? Are you doing a high intensity cycle for this distance in the same way these elite cyclists are doing? Or are you going at a much more leisurely pace a couple of times a week here? Like, you don't need to be fueling the same way, and you shouldn't be. So that's really just what's happening. People are trying to take what they see the elite doing and thinking that's good, whereas not understanding like what is the requirements that person actually has in terms of their energetic requirements.
Awesome. So we'll finish last one. What is your top tips, obviously, for people who are trying to lose weight or drop body fat, like simple stuff that people could take away and apply like right now? You probably touched on a few, obviously, beforehand, but just round them off for us if you can. Cool.
So first one is getting awareness of where you're currently at. So whether that's just keeping a log of your food intake, whether that's taking pictures, whether that's putting in an app like MyFitnessPal, whether it's just getting an idea of calories per meal, just get an idea of what you're consuming. And hopefully that'll be quite informative of showing you where most of your calories are coming from, what days of the week they tend to come on, what meals are maybe higher or lower in calories than you would have thought, whether you're getting enough protein, for example. So just it'll highlight a few things. So to get a baseline by just being aware of what you consume right now. Second to that, if you are assessing and monitoring your progress, pick something that's going to be useful. We typically recommend people use a combination of a number of things rather than just basing all their progress on a scale. It's kind of, I think it's just counterproductive, and it kind of ties into this idea that everyone needs to always lose weight. We'll try and do things that, well, if weight loss is your goal, you'd include that, but maybe we look at also waist measurements. You might combine that with your workout quality. You might give a self-rated number between 1 and 10 of how energetic you feel each day. Trying to combine all those things to see you're progressing in a number of these over time. because that's what the real goal should be. Not just to simply see your scale weight go down. We want to get you healthier. We want you to be able to do more in the gym, feel stronger, have more energy. So track a number of different metrics and be consistent with those. If someone is going to use body weight and it doesn't cause a negative, because for some people, particularly a lot of female clients, there's a kind of a negative connotation with scale weight, and people can really become overly obsessed with that to a negative degree. If that's the case, we tend to avoid that. If that's not the case, then if you're going to use scale weight, do it as regularly as you can and take an average. Don't freak out about it going up or down on any one specific day. It doesn't matter. Take an average, and after 3 or 4 weeks, see is your average per week coming down. Probably for most people, I think would probably do with having a higher amount of protein in their diet. So making sure they're getting a good source of protein at each main meal. So whether that's chicken, beef, eggs, Greek yogurt, milk, like whatever is a good source of protein at each of their main meals throughout the day, and getting enough of that. And then overall food quality, just make sure, don't be obsessive to the point of everything needs to be like clean food or you can't have any bad food ever. But where most of it is the foods you already know are classed as good quality or healthy foods, and then just be aware of maybe the calorie content of those. And that's pretty much, I think, most of the things that if you start working on that list of things there, that will keep you going for a while, but will give probably 95% of the progress compared to any other little details.
Awesome, Don. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. So you've got a few conferences coming up. Do you want to tell us a little bit about them?
Sure. So for people specifically interested in strength training or powerlifting, we're organizing the European Powerlifting Conference. It's in its second year, which is happening in July. So July 21st and 22nd of this year in Dublin. So essentially a who's who of powerlifting coaches, athletes from around the world. Will be 10 guest speakers. There's sessions with some keynote speeches, some panel discussions, some live demonstrations of technique execution. So it's 2 full days, should be pretty cool for people who are interested, like I say, in strength training or powerlifting specifically. And then for me, I'm doing some different talks around the place and probably more to come over the rest of the year. I think the next one up is probably Body Power in Birmingham. If anyone is planning on going to that, it tends to be a popular enough event. So if anyone's there, I'll be there on the Saturday talking. And yeah, I think that's the next thing up for me.
What about the Sigma Symposium?
So that usually happens towards the end of the year. So that will be probably again around October, November time, is when that typically goes down. So that will, be around late October, early November typically. So that's the annual conference that I do. It's again 2 full days of education, new content every year, all evidence-based and referenced. And it tends to get a pretty good reception. So that'll be October, November.
Awesome. So Danny, where can people find more information about yourself, or obviously the stuff that you do, your products?
Cool. Pretty much everything is just at sigmanutrition.com. So SIGMA nutrition.com. If people like podcasts, then mine is just Sigma Nutrition Radio. It's on iTunes, Spotify, all other kind of apps they can find. And then, they can just find me on social media as well. Just Google my name, should pop up for most stuff. Instagram, Danny Lennon _Sigma. Find me on Facebook, my personal account, or the Sigma Nutrition page there. Any of those places, I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Danny, thank you for your time again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I hope you guys start applying some of that stuff. And again, probably being consistent with it, the sort of Dan John style of, the basics aren't sexy, but, they're what works. So again, thank you very much, Dan. And I'm sure we'll be speaking again sometime in the future.
For sure, my man.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay guys, so thanks for watching today, and just one more thing before we go. If you got value from what you just listened to and you get value from the show, then simply pay it forward by sharing. Thank you very much.
Yep.